Welcome to the CANA Connection Podcast. On today's podcast, our guest, Justin Jacobson, will be talking with host Rob Cranston and guest host Jack Murray about esports. He is a lawyer that's involved in both the education, promotion, and business of esports going on in today's world. So without further ado and without me muddying up the intro anymore, let's head on to the show.
Welcome, Justin Jacobson, to our CANA Connection Podcast. Great to see you. You're in New York up there, Long Island?
Yep, I'm here in New York.
We are spread loaded. We got two of us here in the Washington, D.C. area. So that's a Caps versus either a Ranger or an Islander. And then
I'm a Ranger, but I went to GW, so I spent 4 years in DC, so adopted the Caps, knew people that worked there, so they always got us good tickets.
I can't believe you adopted the Caps.
Well, not against the Rangers, but it's like, okay, like I'm not like Ovechkin is always cool, and like I did a lot of events down in Chinatown by where the the stadium is located.
Sure.
So
what were you doing down here in DC?
So I went to college at GW.
And then gotcha. And then from there, we love to hear your journey. And that always starts it off. So why don't you fire out?
Well, yeah, I went to college at GW, and then from there I came back up to New York, where I went to Turo Law here in Long Island to get my legal degree. And from there I just kind of transitioned to being a full-time attorney, starting in the more music and sports world, working with professional athletes and musicians and DJs and producers and fashion designers, all kinds of creative people. And about 7 years ago, I expanded into the esports and gaming world, working with professional gamers and streamers and coaches and casters and teams and just all kinds of companies and talent in the space, and kind of have been doing that for the last several years. And really, in additional kind of to coincide with that, I've actually been teaching some courses. So I've been teaching some esports and video game business courses at University of North Carolina, Wilmington, Post University in Connecticut, and some other universities. So very involved in academia. And luckily, I'm able to actually use the textbook that I wrote, the Essential Guide to the Business and Law of Esports and Professional Video Gaming. So it's really exciting when you get to, sign a book and it's like, oh, well, you can read on this page where I speak about this. And, more recently, I was actually brought in by Ford Models to create an esports and gaming talent division where I handle the day-to-day of 25 different pro gamers, streamers, coaches, and media personalities. So helping them, with their getting signed to different teams, getting sponsorship deals, and really everything else related to, their career growth.
Yeah, and for clarity, so you have a business law, which is the concentration and specialty.
Yeah, so business law and intellectual property, I would say, is kind of my bread and butter. Copyrights and trademarks, contracts, corporations, LLCs. I also handle some visa and immigration stuff for pro gamers and musicians. So really a lot of the legal matters related to, creative talent and influencers. I would say I mostly handle everything other than like criminal law, divorce, and, negligence and personal injury. So being able to be a spot where different talent from whatever creative world they're in can kind of have their legal needs met.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm sure there's, in each per drink, but truly per drink and clientele and just specifics that as companies continue to develop their policies around the terms and conditions components of that, it's been really fascinating to watch the esports community in fragment of different markets, try and figure that out from partnership to partnership. And, Justin, one of the things that we're configuring and figuring out at CANA in our esports platform is really the partnership model and where that fits as an analytics provider across multiple markets. How does that, on the IP side of data coming out of either a gaming tournament or just in general, if we're the black label analytics partner that's building that analytics stack. Have you been involved in some of that recently?
I think that we could definitely see how analytics and data is really crucial to esports, whether it's from a partnership side or even from player scouting. I'm familiar with people like YouGov who provide some in-depth analysis on this, where they're And I think that it's really valuable, especially if you're trying to explain to different brands or, potential partners why they should be involved. And, everyone can say, oh, it's
Mm,
great and it's fun. But I think for real decision makers and people that have, these real budgets, these 5, 6, or 7 figure budgets that you're really trying to get to, there has
yeah.
to be some numbers. There has to be analytics and data that back up your statements. And especially if you're a brand that's going to spend as much as, we're kind of talking about to make like a real impact, you just don't want to spend for no reason. You don't want to spend frivolously. You want to have some, meat behind your, what you're doing. And realistically, if you're from a big company, your budget and the activation is probably not going to get approved unless there's concrete evidence, past ROI, kind of what their metrics are now, the last
Hmm.
6 months, the last 90 days, 60 days, whatever time period, to be able to substantiate, your value. So I think that whether it's with sponsors, and then you kind of see this trend with player development where, teams are scouting players by looking at their
Hmm.
advanced analytics. And I've talked to,
Right.
agents and different players and coaches that, they look at these, kind of the leaderboard and the rankings, and they see who's kind of like, making headway. And then they kind of look at their advanced metrics, because there are certain things that they've noticed, certain categories that if you're placing really high in, or the data shows that you're really successful in, you have a very good shot of being successful, League of Legends, LCS, or, any of these other, professional leagues. And that, there's certain things that can be trained, that, like, you have a coach, you practice full time, we can get certain categories up. You'll just get better naturally by playing more at a high level. But there are
Right.
certain, this kind of comes to the data, there's certain stuff you can't teach. As they always say in, traditional sports, you can't teach speed, you can't teach, length and growth. It's just, there are just certain things that are just natural to certain people. But you can teach route running and technique and,
Hmm.
better ball security if you're a running back, how to, catch the ball with your body instead of using your hands. And so you can tweak stuff, but the baseline metrics, which is what this data comes from, it's really hard. You're not going to make a noticeable difference most of the time.
Hmm. Yeah, those are great points. And I tell you, Justin, it's interesting. We evolved from sports analytics. So we worked in Major League Baseball, hockey, and pro lacrosse. And you're right, the player metrics and business metrics, and how those really combine to create a really a path to ROI. On the product, the player, and then of course all the other marketing and other stuff that's on the business side that's attributable to a player spike or spikes in different marketing material or retail. And it's interesting. So we hovered around. We have really good use cases in that, and then we bring this guy Jack Murray along, who is here. I'm going to hand it over for questions on the technical side. And Jack, is, by the way, is a George Mason guy, and he also has recently, in the past 6 months, joined us full time from being an intern for a couple of years. And Jack, I mean, just Jack's got us on a trajectory of esports. So we said, hey, where else really can we apply analytics in the space of sports analytics? And esports came up. So Jack has really been pushing us into really cool direction that he'll cover in what we're building to. But this gets back into your space and how that mixes into the legal side of us supporting the client base and evolving in esports. So so questions over to Jack on the technical side. Jack.
Awesome. Thanks, Rob. Yeah, Justin, just a quick little background on CANA and where we came from in esports after Rob mentioned that we brought it up and identified it was something we want to get into. The latest thing we're working on right now is an esports recruitment platform for both players and jobs in esports at the collegiate and professional level. So that's kind of what we're working towards, and that's what we kind of discussed earlier with the data and data accessibility. And that I know we talked about it a little bit, but that leads into my very first question on the technical side for you about the move towards more data accessibility and data analytics is growing in the esports industry. And from our experience, it's a little bit difficult to actually get access to that data or have transparency with these publishers and developers. So why is there maybe Why are they hesitant to agree to partnerships with companies that are trying to help with their analytics? Or why is there just a lack of accessibility to that data from the publishers?
I mean, I think that there are some that are more open to others. I think CS:GO has a pretty open, ability to tap into their API for certain stuff. But I think it kind of goes to the fact is that this data is invaluable, that it's extremely valuable to them. It influences how they operate, and realistically they want to sell it. There's not as much value in giving away this protected information unless the price is right, or they want to use it for themselves as proprietary information that will help them evaluate it. That maybe if you're Activision Blizzard, you don't necessarily want Riot Games or Ubisoft to know certain things, get access to certain things. And if they are going to get it, then the price that you're giving it up for has to be, substantially worth it. And I think that because this data is so valuable and it has a lot of uses, they're very guarded on it. I don't necessarily know if that's the right approach. I think that, maybe there's a medium, there's a happy medium depending on what your use of it is. But ultimately, I think that because it's, so novel and sometimes almost the basis of, their business model, they might, really keep it as a trade secret, not really want it to be out there, and, not really want it to be open source the way, some other publishers might, approach game development, data, whatever else is involved in that.
Yeah, and I love how you brought up all the different games and the different accessibility they offer, because Riot Games is commonly known to be more open than a lot of other game publishers themselves. And that was something we discussed with Sari Keitlin back on our last podcast with the collegiate space and their issue. It's really hard to develop something across all colleges in the United States when each game and league doesn't really give the same accessibility that others do. So that was something we identified, and that kind of drives right to the next question. Are there any legal barriers that are really hindering the overall potential growth or success of collegiate esports, that whole space? And if so, what are they?
I mean, I'm very bullish on, collegiate and high school and kind of the non-professional scene. As you see, I teach at a bunch of different universities and I help create curriculum for some other ones. So I'm very involved in that space because I believe it's bullish. But I really believe that there's not really any legal hindrance. It's more that people just aren't that interested, and it's just the viewership numbers don't, really matter. I'm sure you could turn on Twitch and hundreds, if not thousands, of more people have way more viewers involved in it. And realistically, it makes the whole ecosystem, not really workable if you don't have people watching it or you only have 10, 20 people watching it. And, I think when you consider how many people watch, a college basketball game or a college football game, or even, baseball or lacrosse, maybe not these super traditional blue chip collegiate sports, it's not 10 people, it's not hundreds of people, it's a much larger number. And I think that, it's just one of these things where it just has to be more adoption by the student body, the alumni tuning into it, where I think most people that tune into it are probably people that are friends with the kids that are playing or their parents. But it's not like, oh, University of Michigan esports League of Legends is playing, we're all gonna tune in and watch the same way we're all gonna go to the big house when they're playing a team. So I think that is potentially it. If anything, I think the NCAA's stance on name and likeness and their policy towards it has made, college esports an even more open opportunity. At the legal barriers and this gray area is just gone. Where if you were maybe, on a scholarship at a school and you wanted to stream on Twitch or you wanted to get signed to an organization, you really couldn't because you'd run afoul these laws. However, now that the policy has changed, you could be the quarterback for the Hurricanes and sign to Team Liquid and, getting endorsements and sponsored by HyperX and all these different entities, where before you wouldn't be able to do any of it. So I think that it's not
Yeah,
necessarily legal restraints, it's more of just the marketplace itself.
yeah, no, and I love how you brought up the NIL, name, image, and likeness policy, because that was going to be one of our next questions, was the difference between, traditional sports and esports, and that just answered it. But it also drives right into the next question we have here is, what are some of the legal differences between getting recruited to play for a collegiate esports team and a professional esports team?
I mean, I think one of the biggest things is there's no, legal age limit or barriers to entry to be a professional gamer. A platform like Twitch won't let you stream until you're 13. Some games might not be allowed for, certain age restrictions. Some tournament providers might not want to have under 16 or under 18, competitors. But for all intents and purposes, you could be 10 or 11, 12, 15 years old and signed to an esports org, but you obviously can't attend college at 12. There's obviously you might have to graduate from high school or have an equivalent degree, a GED. You might have to take an entrance exam like the SAT or the ACTs. I know when I was applying to college, that was, really part of it. Whereas being an esports player, none of those restrictions. There are no barriers. You can literally be a 16-year-old, go to a tournament, win the tournament, and now FaZe Clan wants to sign you. And it's I had a client that, got signed at 14. He, put up a YouTube video. It went viral. He got 10 million views and his DM started to blow up. And then he got signed to Misfits and went to the Fortnite World Cup. And, he just turned 18 a couple months ago. So it's just kind of, there are none of these barriers that there might be to actually, participate in college and attend a college.
Yeah, and I think that there's this sort of fragmentation within the esports industry right now with all the different leagues and games. And like you said, there's no legal barriers for professional esports, but that also plays into this whole fragmentation section of it. And there's new federations and associations coming out, and you speak to that a little bit in your esports textbook. But can you give us a little insight on what are some maybe ongoing efforts of these national esports associations in the United States and maybe some of these international esports federations as well?
Well, I think what's, interesting about esports and competitive video gaming is it's totally different from the traditional sports world. Whereas the traditional sports world, there's, the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, which governs, all of sport at this international level. And then each country has their own, you have the US Olympic Committee who governs sport within the country, and each country has their own. Whereas esports, because of, as you mentioned, is so fragmented and realistically, and I know I touch on in the book, is what an esport is, what's considered popular now, 3 months from now might not exist, or, new games could come and go. So even the definition of what quote unquote an esport is a bit nebulous, where baseball is baseball, basketball is basketball. You might change rules, but ultimately, basketball is you're dribbling the ball and you're shooting in a hoop. You're not all of a sudden going to have 2 basketballs and 5 different hoops on the court and, kind of change the whole entire fundamental, aspects of the game. So I think because there's a lot of this fluidity in the scene in general, it's really hard for a true authorized body to govern it, especially on an international level and sometimes on a national level. So I would say in countries like the US, there are organizations that were kind of created by, individuals, where it's the same as if me and you wanted to create the North America Esports Association. It's not government sanctioned. It's not a formalized body. It has no regulatory power. It's a club for all intents and purposes. However, in some other countries, for instance, in South Korea, they have KESPA, which actually is an authorized government body and is, under the ministry of, whatever department it is in, and has the ability to regulate and police. They issue pro license visas. They regulate who can actually broadcast certain stuff. And they actually are almost like a government extension in this scene. Similarly, Japan has the Japan Esports Union, which after they changed the laws in Japan in 2018 to actually permit esports, which it was previously prohibitive, it was considered illegal gambling, and it was just, you just couldn't do it there. Now the government has this, JESU, it's called, that actually regulates esports in the country. Japanese citizens that want to be competitive gamers have to attain a license from them. Teams that want to sign players and operate in Japan have to obtain a team license. So, we're in North America, in the US, you don't really have this similar, power. The government doesn't really recognize the authority of, something like the US Esports Federation, or, there's one in Mexico, there's one in Canada, there's most countries have some sort of organization, but for our purposes, they don't really have much, regulatory or power at all. And then there's some international organizations that kind of really pull these national organizations together. There's the International Esports Federation, there's the Global Esports Federation, there's WESCO and WESA and all these other acronyms that you can learn in my book and probably change pretty frequently. And then even below the international level, which is really interesting, is you have these continental and regional, federations, like one that's for Asia, one that's for North America, one that's for, Southeast Asia, and just there's one in the Caribbean islands. And they're meant to kind of represent and, work on activations at a broader place, not just on a country level. So you kind of have all these organizations. Most of them really don't have government, recognition, which means they're kind of like a trade association more than, a government body that can actually enact laws and, sanction you. So I think that kind of ties into the ESIC, the Esports, Integrity Commission. I don't know if you guys are familiar with them, but they're this international board, kind of self-appointed regulators who actually sanction and ban people and suspend them from tournament play. And they have member tournament organizers that just kind of respect their rulings. The big ones like ESL and DreamHack and, some other ones that I'm sure they list on their website, where it's like, if you're found to have violated rules and we, issue, a penalty, whether it's, being banned or fined or whatnot, they're going to respect this. Again, there's not really a regulatory ability. It's not like, the Anti-Doping Association that, has government authority to implement and, to ban Lance Armstrong for doping and, all these other kind of things. It's just really kind of like, oh, well, you organization that created yourself says these guys cheated and you decide that this is the penalty and we're going to respect it. And, I will say it will be interesting to see if anyone really challenges it from a legal perspective as, what is your authority to restrain my ability to work? Who are you to tell, ESL that I can't compete in CSGO? Like, yeah, maybe I cheated. Maybe I did something wrong, but like, I'm not the only one, or like, this is, so I don't know. I think it'll be very interesting, especially for the organizations that don't really have, this government banking and sanction that maybe try to, make policies and enact stuff and regulate the market.
God, that is such great. Right? Go ahead, Jack. Yeah. Wow, that's really important information for everyone that's out there. I think, and Justin, what's interesting is that the space of governing and cleaning up inside the esports community. Again, as Jack mentioned, our commitment to female gaming and how that continues to be a really important piece to access, not just inside the esports community, but other markets as well, and user skill sets into those markets. So, do you think, in that perspective, the cleanup here in the U.S., I guess that's what it would be, the governance cleanup in the U.S. is going to have more of a governing body as we move forward? Potentially?
Probably not. I mean, I think that, as we've kind of seen the way, the NCA, they've kind of said we're not interested in esports. The Olympic Committee is like, I guess we have to, but like, we're not going to take the esports that you guys know. We're going to take, I think they did the virtual Olympic series where they had a rowing game and virtual regatta and, soccer games that nobody plays. And it was just like, you didn't use Madden, you didn't use FIFA, you didn't use 2K. Like, these are, if you want to just go the sports route because you're the Olympics, you could have at least used FIFA, which is obviously the most popular, video game probably in the world, I would say. Or, 2K, which sells, 20 million copies every year like clockwork. So I just think that it's interesting when you have these government bodies that regulate sport at this highest level, just kind of just being like, we're not interested in this. Like, we're not going to kind of talk about it. I'm pretty sure the head of the NCA just said, like, it's just not a conversation they want to have. And that's why the collegiate scene is kind of where it's at, because there is no true, body regulating it. Tomorrow, again, we could start a collegiate esports league, the CANA Esports League. And if we have the proper licensing from a developer, we can talk to every college and be like, hey, sign up for our league. We're playing X game. And now we're a league that people can sign up for. Now we're a college esports league. Where you can't just, you can make like an NFL rival, but it's a lot, it's tough, as we know.
But Professor Jacobson, sir, I tell you what, getting into how do you teach that inside this domain? Seriously, I'd put the Professor Jacobson hat on. That is a nebulous type of topic where structurally it has to be tethered, it being the esports, has to be tethered somehow to a certain set of standards, right? There might be common standard or just, again, known standards, right? So how do you teach that?
Well, yeah, I think that, and kind of touched on with my book and kind of the approach to the classes is at this point, there's kind of standard, and especially I look at this from, a business perspective, because that's really, where I sit on a lot of, everything really. Is from a business perspective to me,
sure,
is that there are just certain things, especially from, income generating perspective, that are just kind of established, and they're very similar to all, personality driven worlds, whether you're a musician, whether you're a pro athlete, whether you're a model, whether you're a movie star, etc. There are just certain income streams that are very, just known. And I think I was able to kind of identify that in the esports world, where it's like, if you're signed to a team, you get a salary. If you're competing in events, there's tournaments, there's sponsorship, there's social media ad revenue, there's, in kind of if you're selling merch. And these are if you're the Rolling Stones selling merch or if you're Ninja selling merch. You might have the ability to be an in-game skin because you play video games, but that's just a type of digital merchandise. The same way there's physical merchandise, there's digital merchandise. So a hat or a t-shirt, or a digital hat or a t-shirt. It's really just under these categories. So the way I kind of approach it is, you have this set of stuff that is, fairly well established and fairly common. And then you also have to kind of update on what's going on, because this stuff really shifts. And I think that's where the course and having someone teach it who's involved in it can update it. I know, for instance, in my book, I talk about, the different business vehicles for esports teams. You have VCs and private equity companies and family offices that were investing. But in the last 2 to 3 years, since the book has came out, there's been this huge trend of teams going public and being publicly listed companies, from, Enthusiast Gaming to Guild Esports to, a bunch of others. So in the lecture, we were able to be like, okay, well, there's actually a new emerging, path that exists where these teams are going publicly funded. And it's, being able to kind of fill in some of the changes that have happened. But again, overnight, people are just not going to not stream, or they're not going to sell merch. The amount you're selling and how successful you are may fluctuate, but the idea of putting your logo on a t-shirt, that goes back to, I don't even know how long that goes back to.
Well, I think in Forrest Gump, right, he had the smiling face, and that was so I think of that, right? It's like, wow. God, these are so the the criteria for partnering and in these verticals, and you talked about this earlier, and I can't wait, by the way, I can't wait to read your book. I know in a lot of contexts that you said the fluidity of, does that get you as a lawyer, putting the business lawyer hat on, with the fluidity of the the esports community, does that create, it's going to create a lot more T's and C's and what would be negotiated contracts, right? But in general, but do you see that as a continued threat to the industry and evolving?
I kind of see it as, there's pros and cons to it. I think the ability that it's like, okay, if a game isn't, we see, these cyclical games where a release comes out, it's really hot, everyone's playing it, there's all kinds of competitive scenes, and then it just kind of wanes away. So I think that it's exciting that you can kind of capitalize on, a new Halo coming out and having the Halo Championship Series and all these successful events. Yeah. And then it's like, okay, now a new game came out. Now Splitgate's out and we're loving it and we're going to play that one. And, Now the new game comes out, and I think it kind of keeps it fresh. I think that, obviously games like League of Legends and Dota, they kind of do patches and introduce new characters and stuff to kind of change it up so that it's not always the same every single, month, year out. So, but from my perspective, how, the business operates doesn't necessarily change. I would think that the fact that there are more games and new stuff, there's a lot more potential, clientele. Although there's also a lot more of a revolving door where, a game like Warzone was the talk of the town forever, and all these teams are signing Warzone creators, and then Warzone really took not the angle direction that people were anticipating, and now you see a lot of organizations dropping their Warzone players and maybe not going in as deep with Warzone 2 coming up as they were with the initial one. So, I think it gives you the ability to have, more people involved, but then it also certain people's career end really quickly. So there's kind of bonuses and pluses and minuses to it, where it's like a new game comes out and you're great at it and now you can go pro, but a game that you're great at might extinguish and that's the end of your career.
Jack. Yes. Yeah. And I know, and Justin, I know you being a gamer, we have a gamer, we both Jack and Koa, but Koa, I know has got probably a couple of questions. He's on the games let's end it with these last couple of questions from Koa. I know we're coming up on time, and just appreciate this discussion.
Yeah, Justin, I always have like the more mundane questions.
Oh, stop!
I always like to just ask
more particular, very focused.
I always like to ask, especially when we're talking esports, just because you're involved in it day in, day out. Yeah. You have a book on it. You're involved on the legal end, and then the prospects of collegiate stuff and everything like that. But do you involve yourself in the nitty gritty ever? Do you ever sit down on a Saturday and you go, you know what, I'm going to play some Halo? What's your go-to? What do you like to do?
I am a big 2K guy. I've been really into Multiversus recently. It's this fighting game that has like Warner Brothers characters like Bugs Bunny and, Arya Stark and, kind of Wonder Woman and Batman and stuff. So that's been kind of what I've been enjoying. Always been a big StarCraft and StarCraft 2 guy. So that's probably my PC game. I've never really been good at first-person shooters. Going back to GoldenEye, I was – and now in Fortnite, I'm the guy that dies first. Like Halo, I was never good. It's just, I'm much more of a sport game guy. Madden, FIFA, 2K are kind of always been my, year in, year out games. But, every once in a while.
So I have a question that leads on from that. So like, because you touched upon it, like somebody's longevity in esports, especially if it's as a gamer and not like back end stuff where you're helping with production or because obviously those skills carry forward into tons of other stuff if you're in the back end, and you're getting involved in it on the marketing end or on the production for media and everything like that, because those skills translate into whatever market that you want to go into, or just additional esports as it goes on. But like my question is, if you were going to get into a skill set of gaming and everything like that, is it do you see the people that are doing better at it ones who have transitioned from older games that have like a kind of a steady throughput, or is it just kind of a roll of the dice, like you never know?
I mean, I think there's a whole generation of younger players that are just extremely, extremely awesome at whatever game it is. I think that as you kind of go up, a lot more of it comes the mental, acuity that you've got and the ability to handle the pressure, the big stage, being able to shake off a terrible gunfight or a bad beat kind of thing. I think that's where more of the age, and experience comes in than necessarily the technical ability. Because I know I'm nowhere near where I was at these games that when I was younger. I can see how much slower I am to click the button on 2K than I might have been. So,
is there ever
my understanding of how the game works and, how you can use angles better to get to the spot you want, that is kind of grown. So it's like maybe, I'm not as quick to, pass the ball or steal as I might have been. But, other strains have, grown and you get other skills to kind of figure that out.
Okay.
Yeah, I just have one last quick question for you. We talked about how the NCAA and the Olympic Committee aren't really accepting esports in itself right now, but my question is, do you see more of these traditional sport video games like FIFA, NHL, Madden, NBA 2K? Do you see those being the ones that are more successful down the line due to some of these traditional sport leagues actually adopting leagues themselves, like the NBA 2K League, the NHL World Championship, now Madden, or now the NFL has
Madden's
Tuesday
always
Night
had their
Gaming on
Madden
top of
Bowl
their.
and all that.
Yep,
I mean,
and now they have Tuesday Night Gaming.
I think as someone who is, very involved in the NBA 2K League, and, I worked with players, worked with coaches. It was, where they were playing for the first 2 seasons was, 5 minutes from my apartment. So I frequented there a lot. And, from people like, there were like jokes of like, you could just see me in every Twitch broadcast, just sitting in the, oh,
That's
there's
great.
Justin in the background of the
Yeah.
broadcast. So I think, and what I've been told by a lot of people, is that there's an inherent limitation to the sports simulation esports, that most fans are much more interested in watching, the grenades and machine guns and, monsters and mythology that some, first person shooters and MOBAs might provide, versus watching people, playing basketball or football or, something that they almost feel like they can go do themselves, and people that are very well connected in this have kind of made that correlation, that you see the most successful esports are these things where it's like, you can't just go, like in Call of Duty and go up and down the street blowing up stuff, or, the way in Fortnite is, you're not going to be running around as Spider-Man, shooting people with grenade launchers in real life. So I think that, that's probably, the biggest thing related to this stuff, is that there's just more interest in watching other people do stuff that you like kind of can't do. And I think that that's one of the things that's really impacted the viewership of, like you said, the NBA 2K League, the Madden Bowl, which, even was on ESPN for many years. So, we'll see.
Do you think that we're in the future, like we're close to like how many years out from having that premier event that gets the kind of, I'm not going to talk Super Bowl like numbers, like you're probably not hitting
League
that
of
kind of thing, but
Legends.
like when do you think we might hit that kind of stage where your average person is going to go, oh yeah, I'm going to watch the blah 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 game tonight, and it's the insert whatever esports
Is it
thing is, where
like
it becomes
sports
that
simulation or
ubiquitous?
esports in general? Like any
In
esports?
esports in general, like what becomes the platform, or the the thing where it's like everybody just knows that this is what happens on Tuesday night or Monday night. Like there's Monday Night Football, you can go watch that. I don't know what team you're watching or anything like that, but like Wednesday night is the night like we watch esports on blah 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 because it's the esports night. Like I don't know if it's a generational thing, like 10 years from now when the kids that are playing Fortnite are adults and everything like that, and like that's the point in time where it's going to happen, where you got this ubiquity that goes on, where people are like, oh yeah, no, Sunday night is insert esport here night to
Right? It's
watch.
not
This
just
is where they'll
HBO
premiere.
Sundays.
Right.
I think
You know,
that, well, no, just not to kind of build off that point. And I feel like a lot of people have been saying, oh, the esports bubble has burst and we're, kind of hitting where we are and it's all going to kind of shrink. I kind of am with your point of, I don't think we're anywhere near what this could be. I think that the generation of, the kids that are 12, 13 years old, 15 years old that are growing up, these Fortnite kids that all you do is see them on their phone, like they've grown up digital everything, digital music, digital books, digital magazines, like everything. Like they never had a big binder of CDs that like I had. They never made, we're burning CDs and burning mixtapes the way, our previous generation is. So I really think that once this, in the next 5 to 10 years, once this age group kind of gets to the point where they're this, demographic that we always tout in esports, it's 18 to 25, people that actually have purchasing power, that are able to, go out and buy things. It's not like, oh, I have to wait for my birthday or Christmas when, my parents are going to get me the new Xbox. It's like, if I want a new headset, I'm just going to go and buy it, and if I want to get a Razer one because I like the colors or I like the functions or because my favorite streamer uses it, I'm going to spend the money. And I think that we're still kind of waiting for that age group to get to where we are now. And then I really think that's when we're going to start to see what this could really become.
Cool.
Justin, thanks for those insights. That was awesome, man. That's Justin Jacobson, folks. He is an author, and I encourage everybody out there in our CANA Connection land. He's the author of The Essential Guide to the Business and Law of Esports and Professional Video Gaming. Go out there and grab it. He's a professor. He's a attorney in the esports community, and most important, I think it wrapped around that, he's a gamer.
And where can people find you?
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys so much for having me. This was amazing. So everyone make sure to follow me on Twitter, Justin J Esq. My DMs are open, so I'm always happy to connect and answer any questions anyone might have, or find me on LinkedIn. Again, I'm always happy to answer a message and provide any wisdom I can.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Thanks again for joining us on today's CANA Connection podcast. A big thank you goes out to Justin Jacobson for joining our host, Rob Cranston and Jack Murray. This is Koa Beam signing off for the rest of the CANA Connection podcast crew, reminding you to analyze, assess, and execute. And we'll catch you next time.